Thank you. Can you hear me okay? Yeah? Okay. Well, let's start. We usually start with one of these things about hold your hands up if you've got this and if you've got that and if you've got Bitcoin or some rare thing or Ethereum or whatever, but let's not do that. Who here knows the name of Laszlo Honyecz? Nobody? Absolutely nobody. Okay, my Hungarian isn't too great, but who knows about pizzas bought with Bitcoin? Okay, so you knew that. Forgot the guy's name, but you knew the pizza thing. Okay, so those pizzas were purchased for 5,000 Bitcoins each. Okay, so the mental mathematicians and those who've checked their block portfolio today will know that that is between 30 million and 35 million per pizza. Okay, so something slightly wrong there, unless it was made of solid platinum or gold or something, and it wasn't. It was a Papa John's. It was 2 Papa John's pepperonis, I think. And actually, Paul knows the guy who got the 5,000 Bitcoins. Don't tell anybody. No, in exchange. So, what does that tell us? Pizzas are getting more expensive? Well, probably not. They are, and they're certainly worth more than $5, which is what they were at the time that they were ordered to in 22nd of May 2010, not that long ago. So what does that tell us? Well, that tells us that perhaps the challenge is really not about methods to be able to exchange cryptocurrency. There's lots of those, and things like Niall's Pesabase, very laudable project trying to bring low currency transaction costs to some developing markets and some of the most financially challenged people. But the real point is the person who bought those pizzas for 5,000 Bitcoin might look back at that transaction and say, I don't think that was really too good. Looking back at that now, it's not a great deal. And the guy who got the pizzas, who paid for the pizzas, received the 5,000 Bitcoin. He's Paul's disappeared, but yeah, he's probably pretty happy right now. So the challenge of stability in cryptocurrency. We all know it's a store of value, and there's all these different ways to spend it. I've met people who've been paid in it, and who now look back and say, that cheese sandwich that I bought in 2012, I could have now got a car with the price that I paid for that sandwich. What was I thinking? So anyway, the bottom line is that people are holding on to the currency. They're not using it for transactions. They're not trying to find new ways of spending it. Everyone's holding on to it and everyone's hoping it will increase in value. So it's not, as Paul said at the beginning, behaving like a transactional currency, and it's not much use as a transactional currency. So Sweetbridge, we're a blockchain alliance for a liquid supply chain. So why did we start with the supply chain? Well, we're trying to bring liquidity. And if you think about it, supply chain's a great place to start. Why not banking? I hear you say. There'll be some bankers out there and everybody will be saying, well, banking, you have charges, you have payments. Supply chain has a rhythm and a regularity to it which none of the other use cases really have. People have to buy stuff, they have to sell it. Suppliers need paid, revenue needs to be generated, sales need to be made. So there's a continuous throughput of liquidity in the supply chain, which there isn't in your 5,000 Bitcoin pizzas, because you're not doing that every week. It's only an occasional purchase and people are holding on to it, so there's no liquidity. So that's why we started with the supply chain. So what are supply chains? Well, some people would say, what do you think of when you think of supply chains? A huge container ship with lots of containers bringing bananas to Ireland or some other useful purpose for supply chains. But really, supply chains are, and this is an American presentation, but it's either Mother Nature or supply chain. So the panels we're standing on, the clothes you're wearing, the ceiling tiles were either produced locally by local artisans and workmen in the Shoreditch area, or else they were brought here by a supply chain. And if you think about those pizzas, that's a form of the supply chain, and they were part of that supply chain. So the supply chain is actually bigger, and here's some nice gold to look at, is actually bigger than the financial market. The only thing that's bigger is the entire stock market. So it's a $50 trillion business. And there's a lot of friction in it. There's a lot of cost, and there's a lot of things tied up in those transactions. So this is a bit of the sea, obviously, but we're really asking, how do we get liquidity in that supply chain? That's the challenge. So we've put together a big team, and we're working our way up through liquidity, settlement, accounting, resource sharing, and optimization of liquid talent, and looking at risk management across that. The one we're going to talk about tonight is liquidity. So it's the first one to solve. So how are you going to get that liquidity in the supply chain, and what would you need to do that? Well, first of all, we started with a bunch of really old people like me who've been doing this for 20 years or more, who've been working in finance, supply chain, logistics, and running businesses and understanding how that works, serving some of the world's largest companies. And we've put together a team from 8 different countries with experience in supply chain, technology, economics, finance, legal, and even governmental, because we realize you're going to have to get government to buy in at some point. And you'll see some countries are welcoming this area with open arms, and others are saying, you know, it's terrible, it's all pirates, and everybody's buying drugs, and it's the dark web. So you actually need government lobbyists to say, look, hang on, you know, this is business to business. It's all a closed network, and it's all fully KYC and AML'd. So what's the problem? You know, if we're doing the same as everything else, why is that pirates, and why is that a problem? So some countries are more open to it than others. We have a couple of ex-Federal Reserve economists and some very clever mathematicians working on the stability mechanism, which I'm not going to explain tonight, but our white paper is available, as is our crowd sale document on sweetbridge.com. But I'll take you through some of the highlights of what we're doing here. We're building an alliance because we're a Swiss not-for-profit foundation, and 10% of our funds, not profits, because that could be manipulated, our funds go to social impact projects to fund sustainable activities in developing countries and challenged environments. I'm not going to talk you through all of the different alliances we have here, but you know, some of the highlights. I don't know if is anyone here studying blockchain at university or on a Coursera course or something? No? One person. Okay, excellent. 2. So where do you go to get your degree in blockchain, right? Do you just teach yourself and watch YouTube videos? What do you do? Well, pretty much, right? But so the biggest university in America is actually Arizona State University, which has, I think it's 200,000 students or something ridiculous. And there is a year of 2,000 blockchain students, and they're actually launching a blockchain degree. So get your interns from there. I'm sure they'd love to come to London. We can put you in contact with the key contacts at the university. They're part of our alliance, and they're going to be working with us. The other one I'd mention would be New Law US, Attorneys at Law. That's a consortium of 400 lawyers in the US who are working to change the way law works using the blockchain and trying to provide more benefit to more groups. I'm not going to go through the rest, but basically there are far more. There's another 18 which aren't, the logos aren't on here yet, but we're building a bigger and bigger alliance every day. Okay, so it's more than blockchain. We're working with the supply chain and the legal one, that's the first 2, but we're looking also at life sciences, tax and compliance, retail, and all the usual financial services, high tech, and manufacturing. So I'm not going to go through that in too much detail, but I'll just say that it will take a community and it will take an ecosystem. We're one of the largest projects out there. I think we talked about the 8 different countries and nationalities. We've also taken legal advice for many jurisdictions in terms of offering our tokens, which I'm not going to discuss here, but I'm happy to answer questions on afterwards. Okay, so liquidity. Now you see what's happened is the one that was at the bottom has jumped up to the top and made itself really big, because that's what we're going to talk about. So liquidity. Liquidity is about the trillions of dollars that are locked up in this process. Again, everything's in US dollars because that's the world's currency, right? For now. Bitcoin hasn't taken over just yet. So if you're familiar with this, you'll know that the world's largest companies don't take 30 days credit terms. They don't take 45 days credit terms. They don't take 60 days credit terms. They take 90 days credit terms. Why? Because they can. So there's sometimes 90 days here and 90 days here. They just pass on those terms down the line. So you've got bigger than the 54 trillion because you've got doubling up of that money all locked up in there. Our first 2 pilot schemes are with a global rice consortium, rice, cashew nuts, and something else. But they tell us that the cost of moving rice is 20%. So if you're a rice farmer and you want just on the currency, it's 20%. And Pesabase showed some outrageous percentages of 10, 11, 12, 13. And some of you thought that 2.25 was an outrageous percentage. But I think we could all agree 20 is an outrageous percentage, right? So the rice community, if you're a rice farmer, you have to pay 20% just to get the money. This is not about transport, logistics, or anything. That's just to sell your rice from your location to the other location on the other side of the world. And that stuff feeds 2/3 of the world's population. So, is that fair? Just going to leave that question dangling there. So basically, how do you try and unlock all this and get some actual liquidity flowing? So that's what we're going to talk about. So introducing to you tonight 2 coins, tokens. The first coin is either the most boring cryptocurrency you will ever meet, or if you're interested in stable coins, it might be the most interesting. But this one has no Lamborghinis promised, delivered, possible. It will do absolutely nothing, and it's guaranteed. It be pegged to fiat currency, starting with the US dollar. And it's for business-to-business payments. It's a closed network, and everyone on it will be fully KYC, AML'd. It's like membership of a club. So it will be exchanged, and it will be redeemed, and there will be liquidity provided on it. But that will be done by ourselves or people we nominate to do it. It won't be listed on other exchanges. So that's the bridge coin. For There Will Be Lambos Brigade, or who's here to see what can I invest in that's a cryptocurrency, I can't guarantee any of those for this either. This is a membership token, but it will float freely. And it's kind of used as insurance to help you borrow more, pay less interest, and get free settlement on our closed network, and also a free crypto bridge. So that's the plan. Our fees will start at 10 basis points, going down to 3 basis points. That's our plan. There may be crypto bridge fees that are required above that, but that will be dependent on our ability to obtain licenses to do that in all the countries we want to do it in, and what's being charged by our partners providing that liquidity from the crypto bridge. Preferably, we're going to do it all ourselves with ideally credit unions or not-for-profit entities but our aim is to get the costs as low as possible. So that's Bridgecoin and Sweetcoin. The two coins, they kind of go together. This one's on the closed network. This one will be ERC20 open. They're both ERC20 based tokens. And I'll just go on there. So here's our first example, and I think I didn't ask who owned Bitcoin, but lots of people had heard about the pizzas, so they've probably some idea what's going on here. If you do cryptography, you'll know that everything has to involve Alice and Bob. So that's why we have Alice and Bob here for the example. So you can see how old this slide is by the fact that the Ethereum is $200 per token. Hopefully it's still more than that today as I speak. It's not quite had the rise of Bitcoin, but it's done pretty well. So let's imagine that Alice has invested $10,000 and bought 50 Ethereum at a price of 200 each, okay? So stay with me on the calculations. We'll try and get through this. So what we've built is a vault into which you can lock cryptographic assets. And you'll say, well, why cryptographic assets? Why not other assets? Well, other assets have various degrees of challenging regulation, and we aim to cover all of those. We've joined with Materium and the Internet of Things, which are a huge group of lawyers, and they are taking on the challenge of how to put assets on the blockchain. But let's start with the ones that we know you can put them on the blockchain today, and that's crypto assets, especially ERC20 ones, which is quite a simple proposition. So Alice has deposited 50 Ethereum into her Sweetbridge fund account, or vault, and she is able to borrow 50% of her Ether value in the form of 5,000 Bridgecoin, which is linked exactly to the US dollar at a one-to-one basis. So why 50%? Well, it's a number chosen out of fresh air. It might be 20%, it might be 70%. It's certainly going to start low and then build based on the the actual coins. You won't get a high percentage out of some illiquid, terrible coin that nobody can get rid of. So we've chosen 50% just to show you the example here. So once that's locked in, Alice can't spend it. She can't send it to anyone. She can't use it anywhere else. It's locked in the vault. But she has received 5,000 Bridgecoin for it, which she can then go and use. So what can she do with that? Well, she can exchange her 5,000 Bitcoin to buy the next mining machine, if that's what she's into, or she can use it to buy groceries or a car or whatever she likes. Or, and this is for the crypto investors, she could use that to purchase another cryptocurrency. In this case, she's used that to buy Bitcoin. So what's happened here is she's still got her Ethereum. It's not gone away. It's not evaporated. It's not been given to us. We don't take any ownership of it. It's just cryptographically protocol locked in a vault where she can't get access to it, and we can liquidate it if the price moves too rapidly versus the borrow line, which if we go back, that's what we're calling that 50% would be the borrow line. You can borrow up to 50% based on that. So basically she could go and buy another currency with that without having to sell her Ether. So when the price increases to $300, Alice wants to sell her Ethereum for profit. She can either repay the Bridgecoin or instruct the vault to sell a small portion of her Ethereum to repay her liability. So she's getting the best of both worlds, two investments for the price of one. It's basically be your own bank or UOU. You're borrowing from yourself. We're not looking to charge any rent on this or take anything from it other than network fees, which you can again reduce by using Sweetcoin. So Alice was able to borrow from her Ether without having to sell it, and that led to a $5,000 profit. We didn't include any rise in the Bitcoin price We just simply showed what happened if the Ethereum price rose. Now, if you imagine you're running a business with 1.5 million or 1.5 billion tied up in assets and what you might do with that. As I said, we're working on collateralizing inventory, invoices, real estate, all classes of assets, and working with a big team of lawyers on that. So that's it. Lend yourself money, interest-free, without another party. This is our app, which I'm not going to give you a demo of tonight, but it's built, again, on the Ethereum blockchain, and basically allows you to manage your own finances and borrow from yourself, basically, by locking your own assets and then taking something back from them. And that's it. I'm happy to take any questions. Okay?
Hi, so just to clarify, you can put 50F in your vault. You get 5,000 Bridge coin or Sweetcoin, whichever one. You can then buy Bitcoin with that. What's to stop you from buying Ether with that Bitcoin and doing this process recursively?
Well, that's a great question. I mean, you're right. Everyone will try and game the system and continually reinvest what they've bought. Well, the Bridge coin that they get is members on a closed system, and the purchase and sale of it is only authorized by us. So we would have visibility to that. So we wouldn't allow. It's a depreciating return. You're only allowed less and less. So you might get to do that twice, but past that, we just say no. Does that answer your question? Okay.
I've got a more of a simple question, twofold. What is the difference between Bridge coin and a normal exchange? And what is the security on the other end if Ethereum goes down in price?
Okay, so your first question was, what's the Bridge coin? Sorry, can you repeat the first one?
What's the difference between Bridge coin
Yep.
or Sweetbridge and a normal exchange service?
Well, an exchange service, you've actually lost the right to your original tokens. The first question was, is what's the difference between an exchange and what we're proposing here? Well, in an exchange, your tokens have gone. Your Ethereum's done. It's on the exchange. And I can tell you that to date, 36 exchanges have gone out of business. Some of them written by teenage kids just on a computer. Many of the exchanges you look at today, maybe nothing more than software. But so we're not offering exchange. We're offering something locked in a vault, which is still yours. You just can't have access to it unless you repay what you've borrowed. And what was your second question, Bo?
The second question is, what is the security hedge against
The Bridge coin borrowing.
value?
Okay, so what's the security hedge? Well, the security hedge is the asset that's been locked in the vault. So our protocol allows us to liquidate that if the price drops, the price balanced across a basket of exchanges drops below a certain level. Not one exchange, so you can't have a flash attack on it or something, or get in and change the price and then everybody's liquidated at $20, which has happened on crypto exchanges. So it's basically that asset itself locked in the vault.
So just to clarify the point you're making in terms of what is the actual security, it's the membership fund that is used to purchase Bridgecoin.
That's correct. The assets which are locked in the vault is the security. Sorry, yes?
Yeah, so effectively it's a margin loan basically. But then let's assume someone borrows, invests, loses it, can't repay it.
What do we do?
Yeah,
Okay.
What do you do? And then how do you connect? Obviously, what you try to achieve with Sweetbridge is a very big ecosystem-wide thing, and obviously this is just the start. And I see how this would apply to the supply chain.
Yes.
Because a company that has a 90-day credit
Yes.
term, they can do this to get their cash. But then what's the next step?
Okay, so I think you're asking me a couple of questions there. The first question was, what happens if Alice goes out and buys a Ferrari and crashes it into a tree and is intestate at death and doesn't have a will and has no money? What do we do? So in that case, we would liquidate Alice's Ethereum, which is still locked in the vault. That would revert to us to close the deal at the end of the loan, or if the price dropped below. And I'll maybe get you to repeat your second question.
And the second question is how this will tie into like the broader Sweetbridge plan to create like an.
Great. Like I said, we're only starting with crypto, but if you think about it, that supply chain, the 5,000 Bitcoin pizzas tell you why people are not going to do business with Bitcoin. Because if nobody wants to do business with something that's up and down, and you're going to be sore by the time you pay the invoices, they don't want to do that. So we have to collateralize more. We need a stable coin to do business in order to collateralize the assets over the time cycle of sales to payment purchases. Sorry, yes.
So your clients purchasing your bridge or Sweet coin itself.
Yes.
They're surrendering their private key to you so that
Yes.
you can liquidate it. So,
They're not the private key. They're sending us the Ethereum.
so again, I'm quite new to this stuff, but I
Okay.
was under the impression that if you hold your private key and you hold your coin on an e-wallet or something to that effect, no one can use it because you have that private key.
That's right.
So how is it that you're going to be able to liquidate the Ethereum?
Well, you get sent the Ethereum. So when you do an Ethereum transaction, the question is, if we don't take their private keys, how do we get control of their assets? Well, we're not taking their private keys. They're sending us the Ethereum, which we'll receive. We'll give them an address to send it to, which is our address, which we have the private keys for, and it will be attributed directly to that vault.
So, and the only thing they have a security to say that you'll pay them back is some sort of certificates or.
It's a public blockchain. They can go and access the address. They'll have the address and they can see it locked up there. And they know we won't touch it based on the terms and conditions unless the value of the asset falls. Yeah? Yes?
I understand the margin finance piece of it. Go back to the application of it. You opened with Irish bananas.
Yes.
So let's say, how are you going to collateralise Irish bananas Jamaican bananas in transit at sea, which have degraded because of bad storage, and then I come along and say, well, hang on, I've securitised these bananas and bought some Bitcoin.
Well, that's a great question, and I would stop you changing the bananas from Irish to Jamaican, because they are the biggest exporter of bananas in Europe. Manufacturer, in fact, in case you didn't know that, but fun fact. But no, I think...
do a lot of the import.
Correct, absolutely. I think you'll...
They don't actually produce bananas in Ireland.
Well, I think you'll find technically you're wrong there, but I'm happy to explain it to you afterwards. It's something to do with the rate of taxation for manufacturing. So, but we'll go into that later. So, okay, so what happens if the bananas are bad? Obviously, you have insurance on your goods, because the fact that the bananas have gone bad is nothing to do with us collateralizing them and nothing to do with them being on the blockchain. So you have to, as a responsible seller and buyer, you have to purchase insurance against that container having too many tarantulas or something in it, or no halon gas or whatever it is that stops them from rotting. But no, we're planning to collateralize lots of different assets, and you're right, there are a lot of things that go wrong with the supply chain. There's a lot of things that go wrong in that area. That's why we're a bunch of old guys with 100 years experience between the top 4 or 5 of us who've dealt with this with some of the world's largest companies. The first pilot we have is with one of the world's largest pharmaceutical companies, who are very keen to get started on turning this around. But you're right, there's plenty to be worked out. But we believe we've got the people on board to do that. Yes?
Okay, one more.
Sorry, one more.
So what happens if your vault, which is the place where you store all the collateralized assets, is compromised or is attacked?
It's a great question. I have another slide deck which covers how difficult it is to hack a private key. Now, we're not pooling the assets. We will have a separate private key and a separate wallet and vault for each of the accounts. So you literally have to, I think they've said it takes 40 years or something to run the world's fastest computer to crack the private key, which is 2 to the 77 or something, the number of digits. If you work out how to crack that, you don't need to invest in anything. You'll be fine. You can just start helping yourself. But no, so the difference is we're not pooling that. So today, if someone hacks a bank in London, right, or Target in the US, or Equifax in the US, or any of these things that you're from, or the NHS, if they hack any of these things, guess what? There's only one thing to hack. There's one lock to pick, one key to pick, and once you're in, you're in. So the banks can do all sorts of things to keep the stuff safe, but there's literally one access point. If you think every single vault has its own access point and its own key to pick. So you could spend a huge amount of money trying to crack into one of them, but it's inefficient and economically non-viable to do it across the whole network. And that's why this is decentralization is essentially safer than centralized. Yes?
So, but it's closed, security.
No, but closed system. What I meant by a closed system was all the participants are fully KYC and AML'd, and we're the only people allowing transactions in Bridgecoin. Other than that, it's completely public on the Ethereum blockchain. So you can query addresses and look at transactions. Is that us? Okay.
Sorry. Okay, guys.
Available for questions later. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.